All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Therapy Today, and we have another podcast guest here today. We are here with Paige, who is an EMDR therapist. You can find her on her Instagram at Therapy with Paige, and the link will be in the description below. But we are so excited to have her here. Thank you so much for joining us today, Paige.
Of course. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here too.
Yeah, thank you for being here. So, talk to me first about what's your background and what's your training.
Yes. So originally, I started off as a recreational therapist
Hmm.
from my undergrad degree. And then with that, I did a lot of mental health work. I worked in a lot of inpatient hospital settings. I worked in prison, like correctional facilities as well, with some death row inmates for a
Wow.
little stint as well. And then eventually just found my way to social work. I wanted to go back to
Hmm.
school and be able to do a bit more with my degree and with my career, and have always been interested in providing psychotherapy to folks. And that's what brought me to go back. Yeah.
Okay. So, you are a licensed clinical social worker then?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. And
Yeah.
so, since you started in recreational therapy, what have been some of your clinical interests as you've done your work as a social worker?
Yeah. So with recreational therapy, I was introduced to a lot of different types of coping skills and relaxation
Hmm.
techniques. I myself have struggled with anxiety, and so finding those and using them on myself was a really cool
Yeah.
way to see the benefit and be able to kind of get passionate about kind of somatic practices with my clients as well. But it allowed me to work with a lot of different populations, which was good to figure out what I was passionate about.
For sure. And that's very cool. And one of the things that I'm hoping that we'll see today for you all who are watching is that Paige is going to show us some of the things that we might do on a day to day basis. Very simple kind of somatic techniques like you're talking about that can help with anxiety or maybe some other mental health challenges that people face. And so, within that vein, I know what we're focusing on today is EMDR. And so, for people who aren't familiar, give us a rundown of what EMDR actually is.
Yeah, I was trying to think about a concise enough way to describe it because I could go on so many different tangents.
That's why I
Um,
asked you to define it and not me.
yeah, it's an eight-pronged approach that is a evidence-based practice to reduce the effects of trauma. Um, Essentially, what we do is we use bilateral stimulation to reduce the emotional intensity of different distressing events. And so it can be a big trauma, but it can also be something smaller, something that has impacted you that you might not have realized has impacted you.
Okay. And so you mentioned the term bilateral stimulation. What does that mean in
Yes,
normal
yeah.
people terms?
Thank you. Yeah. It is okay. So, bilateral stimulation is just activating both sides of your body. So, it can be eye
Hmm.
movement. So, it might be following
Okay.
the clinician's finger in session
Hmm.
or fingers in session. It might be bilateral tapping. So, it would be fast tapping. It also could be tones. So, with headphones, it might be
Huh.
like beeping in either ear and just alternating the beeping. So there's a lot of different methods that you can use based on the person and what
Hmm.
what works best for them.
Okay. Yeah, that's really cool. And so you said this was developed originally for trauma, but you said it doesn't have to necessarily be limited to, I guess, like severe PTSD. Who else can
Right.
EMDR be useful for?
Yes. I mean, it can be useful for a slew of like anxiety disorders, panic attacks. It can be good for, I use it for a lot of self-esteem issues.
Hmm.
Um, I've used it for medical, like health anxiety, postpartum anxiety, like car accidents. And so it can
Hmm.
be, there can be a lot of different issues to target within that.
Okay. And so every time I describe EMDR to somebody, I think of it as still as like a magical kind of therapy because like what you're talking about intuitively it doesn't seem to make sense how that would help. But I'm wondering if you could break down a little bit like some of the mechanics of like why is this effective for people?
So what it does is it just helps us to store the memory in a different way, in a way that feels like healthier, more adaptive. So it's not like erasing the memory. But something with like the bilateral stimulation just helps us file it differently. So we know it happened, we know it affected us, but for whatever reason, it's just not having that big charge when we face like daily triggers that might remind us of it. And it can reduce like the flashbacks, the hypervigilance. Yeah, I mean, even when I've done it with clients, they're like, "Is this voodoo? Is this witchcraft? Like, how does this not feel so intense anymore?"
Right.
And it doesn't, it's not the end all be all for everybody. And one session of EMDR isn't going to be like a quick fix. But for so many of my clients, like you can see the change and you can see the effect in their daily life and in their anxiety and trauma symptoms. And for some folks, like the material is just too intense and they just need more time to kind of create safety in their body a bit more and to do some more of that resourcing that we're going to get into in a little bit too.
Yeah.
So the path can look different for different people.
Okay, so it sounds like there needs to be a lot of flexibility on the part of the therapist and of the client to be able to figure out like which of the eight prongs we're going to in EMDR on any given session.
Yeah, yeah. It's not always linear. I think the material is going to vary. That's going to kind of change how slow we go. I think it's good to go slow anyways, but sometimes we might go super slow to just make sure that things are feeling safe enough. So within an EMDR, you want to stay within like the client's window of tolerance. If they are outside of their window of tolerance, then that could kind of create dissociation. They might not be able to be like fully present to process. That's not like a safe space to reprocess trauma.
Got it.
So we just kind of like note if we're seeing any indicators of that, which isn't always easy. And so then it's really important for the therapist and the client to be super communicative to make sure that what we're doing is okay and safe.
Yeah, and that brings up a practical question for me because by nature you're working with uncomfortable topics, things that are going to be emotional for them to talk about. And so,
Yeah.
how do you assess whether they're outside of their window or whether it's just a normal and appropriate kind of discomfort that they're experiencing?
Great question. And I think, that's something that getting to know the client, a bit more ahead of time is important to understand how they handle emotional material and like what they're capable of tolerating and what they're not. A good indicator is like if we are reprocessing something and if they're like, okay, I'm calmer, great. That's part of the goal. But then if they're like, I'm calmer, but I'm also feeling really numb, like there's nothing there, then that's an indicator to me that their, protectors or managers or like their system is just kind of shutting it down. Like this is too much. We simply can't keep feeling this right now.
Okay. Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense. So, just getting a baseline and being, like you said, being able to communicate between therapist and client on how
Yeah.
things are going and being able to have a conversation about that.
Yeah. Yeah. And, the client can choose to pause or stop whenever they need to. If it does seem like, something is getting more emotional, if they're not quite outside of their window of tolerance, but they might be there shortly, then I might try some techniques. For example, it can look like, just imagine you're on a train passing by, you're seeing this happen at a distance. And so that can help. So there's little kind of cognitive interweaves that we can use to make it like less intense. Another
Okay.
favorite is like snapping a picture. It's on a Polaroid. You put the Polaroid across the room. Maybe it's black and white. So it's like far away, it's
Uh huh.
there, but we're not in it in this
Okay.
moment.
Yeah. Just getting a little bit of distance from what the experience or what the memory and emotion might
Yeah.
be. Okay.
Yes.
Great.
Yes, absolutely.
So I think we've transitioned a little bit naturally into talking about some of the resourcing, I think you called it earlier.
Yeah.
So within EMDR, what does resourcing mean and what are some of the tools that are included in that that people might use on a daily basis?
Yes. So an easy one that I introduce to clients pretty early on is just it's called the butterfly hug.
Okay.
Um, and I thought it was interesting. Somebody worked with the V or at the VA
Uh-huh.
with like ex-military folks, and they like to call it eagle wings instead, which I thought was like a funny, like so masculine
Yeah, you just got to fit
spin.
your target population.
Yes, yeah. So butterfly tapping or butterfly hug is just
Uh-huh.
kind of crossing your hands.
Okay.
You can cross them like inward in your chest. You can cross your
Mm-hmm.
thumbs, whatever feels right. Some people
Okay.
like to just put them on your shoulders, whatever works. For me, I like to kind of go inward.
Okay.
Um, and you just very slowly alternate tapping. And this is just to soothe your nervous system. It's kind of like, if you're walking slowly, sometimes you feel like you can calm your system that way, and that's a form of bilateral stimulation on
Hmm.
its own. But something about being like closer to your heart right here can be nice for soothing anxiety, if you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're experiencing trauma symptoms. This is a good go-to.
Well, that's really cool because I feel the the feedback from my heartbeat in my hands, but I also feel like my heartbeat is also responding to the pace that I would tap at.
Oh, some like biofeedback,
A little bit,
maybe.
but that does feel really relaxing. And a lot more awareness of my breath as I'm doing it too.
Yes. Yeah, same. So this is a cool one to kind of use
Mm-hmm.
whenever you need it. Any of these resourcing techniques are good to practice when you're not stressed out, so that when you are
Mm-hmm.
very stressed or anxious or overwhelmed, then you can access them. And then I will do another one with you. So if you think of a distressing moment,
Okay.
maybe like you stepped in dog poop or you left your, just mildly distressing.
Okay.
Uh, you left your keys somewhere, your wallet somewhere. And just think of that distress. Imagine it somewhere in your body. And then I want you to imagine the distress like energy. So it's energy going in a certain direction. It's either going clockwise or counterclockwise.
Okay.
Okay. And
Yeah.
I want you to imagine just gently shifting that energy into the opposite direction. And just let me know what you notice or if you notice anything.
Yeah, the image in my mind is like almost like if you're stirring a soup or something and then you have like the everything going in a certain direction and then you kind of start stirring the opposite direction where
Yeah.
there's a little change of momentum,
Uh-huh.
but then it's very fluid and I feel like I can do something with it. I can manipulate it.
Yeah, like you have some type of control over kind of your body's response to
Yeah.
that stressor. And so I think, yeah, part of that is just to like slow it down, realize like, okay, I can calm my system. And that's called the spiral technique.
Okay. Very cool.
Yeah, yeah. So just a couple of items, but there's so many things that we can do within resourcing.
That's
Yeah.
very awesome. So thank you for sharing those. And do these resourcing techniques have to be used within the context of EMDR, or is this something that people can take even if they're not doing EMDR and use it in general?
Yeah, absolutely. They can take it and use it in their daily life. I mean, these are safe skills that you can just add to your toolbox, whether you have done or you're going to do EMDR or not. It's just good skills to help settle your nervous system.
Thank you so much for sharing your background and your knowledge about EMDR and how that works for clients who both are suffering from trauma response as well as for those who are dealing with other mental health challenges. Again, everybody, as you check out this video, make sure you check out her Instagram at Therapy with Paige, and the link will be in the description below. Thank you all so much for checking out this video. Please make sure you like and subscribe. Stay up to date with all of our different content, including some more conversations like these with other clinicians. And we'll definitely have Paige back for another interview at some point. So thank you for watching. And Paige, thank you so much for joining us today.